My role is Chief Operating Officer. I'm one of the two co-founders of the business. We started the business in early 2022. And in short, my role oversees the execution portion of our business. So from the moment we receive a purchase order, or we win a contract, all the way to performing the work, closing out the project. And I also oversee the financial aspect of our business. So that includes going down that same timeline. That includes billing, invoicing, project financials, making sure all of that information is organized in a way that we can assess how we're performing on different projects for different customers. Definitely, when we started the business, probably like many startups, we started with another system. The one we were using was QuickBooks, and it just got us off the ground, but we grew a lot very fast. And so we were branched into new business lines, new very large customers, and have a sophisticated set of investors. And so while QuickBooks was really good at getting us off the ground, it very quickly became clear to us that it wasn't what we needed in order to have a very good understanding of how we're performing, and also be very efficient in how we're retrieving information and analyzing that information. Really there, Julietta Apollyon, our controller, and we worked together with her spearheading this effort of looking at what are our options. And at one end of the spectrum, you have where we were, and we knew that wasn't an option, but just working our way through kind of the continuum of really hundreds of options. At the other end were big solutions like NetSuite, and we looked at all of those, but what we found was that the big ones weren't really suited for what we needed, primarily because they were very rigid. They weren't as malleable functionally, but also the people that were across the table didn't seem to have an appreciation of what it's like to run a small business. And that's what really resonated with us with Dominate, and specifically working with Rob, is that he had the background of working with the really large businesses. And so knowing what it takes to reach scale and be able to deliver at scale, but also appreciating the challenges of getting there. Yeah, I'll say it's been a few years now, so I'm trying to recall specific details, but a lot around it. It became clear to us that we needed to, in order to bring all our data into our ERP in a unified way, we needed to start adjusting the way that we expect for data to be delivered from other vendors, and so going through the exercise of project financials and how do we make sure that our costs are broken down granular enough to where they're properly allocated to the projects, and having that as a requirement, for example, from our fuel card vendor, and being able to allocate project finances based on the different vendors was really important. I'd say as technical aside, it was a great sign that Rob wanted to come meet us in person, sit down and speak with us. And at that time, when we first started working together, we were a really small business compared to where we are today. So that's been really important to us from the very beginning and on to where we are today, that they put time aside to meet with us and really hear us out.
And then during implementation, how did Dominate make the implementation feel manageable?
Yeah, look, as all implementations, it wasn't an easy task, but it was manageable in that it never drifted away, in that we always were, Dominate was prompt to be present when we found an issue that we hadn't predicted when we first started the process, and really work with us to find a solution step by step. It's not going to be solved. There's no silver bullet, but to start tackling the things we can tackle, and leaving the more challenging ones to the end, to the point where they're more manageable.
And then are there things that you're able to see now that you couldn't see before, whether it's visibility?
Definitely. I mean, it transformed the way that we look at our financials, because before this, it was a very high level, very general view that we had. And at this point, we use project financial analysis all the time. We use the approval workflows all the time. That's made things very efficient. And one of my favorite features, if we're at this, I don't know if there are other questions where we can dive into this more, is how Rob and his team made us appreciate all the tools that were available to us. Because, for example, while the Acumatica web interface is very helpful, Rob helped us understand the power of Velixo as a tool of being able to not only refresh the data, but parse the data and have it organized in a way that's very efficient. So for example, when we close our books every month, that's the channel through which we review all the details. And it's made that process very efficient, to the point where we don't have similar, compared to other businesses, we have fewer staff because of the automation and the efficiency that we've gained through our, not just our ERP, but the tools that are able to connect to it. Acumatica, for example, they have so many tools, right? But I think the expertise and the value add comes to understand our business and him say, look, out of these 10 tools, these 4 are really helpful, these 2 may be helpful, and these last 4 are probably not worth your time. And so that, makes, kind of turns a very kind of chaotic overview of all the possible tools into something that's applicable and we can spend time. I'd say the biggest win is the amount of time that we spend on organization and data collection and viewing the data and parsing the data.
If you had to describe Dominate in 3 words, what would they be?
I'd say present, attentive, and professional.
And then what would you say to a company still trying to run jobs on spreadsheets and disconnected tools?
I'd say that while all implementations are overwhelming, the amount of time lost in the spreadsheets is very difficult to parse out, but it's there and it's a big impact to the business. That's number 1. Number 2, it's tough to scale, because while you may have 1 or 2 or 5 people that are very proficient in the spreadsheets, if the team is trying to scale or if the team experiences changes, then that can be a very big drag to the organization, because that tribal knowledge, so to speak, of the spreadsheets, it's difficult to pass to new members. Well, implementation sets the foundation of how the software will be used, and so the implementation, so it really sets the course of how the software will be used in terms of establishing the right tools the proper way, so that when the software is online and the process of using it has started, it's not riddled with problems. And aside from spending time on that, proper implementation, I think, can positively or negatively affect who are the champions of the software. And so if you set it up right, it's much easier to win champions who will then encourage its usage and encourage proper compliance throughout the organization, versus if the first 2 months of using the software are not what people expected, then it's really tough to reverse that over time.
If I had to ask you, what was the real cost of not having accurate job data before?
I mean, the cost, the most tangible cost is lost profit, right? I mean, not knowing, especially when jobs get big and complex, or when there are a number of jobs, it's difficult just by looking at the transaction expenses, which is what other simpler or just spreadsheet only tools offer. It's easy to get to lose sight of costs and lose sight of billable opportunities.
And then with this better visibility, what does that allow you to do now as a leader in your company?
The most exciting aspect is that it makes it easy to share the data with the team members that control the outcomes day to day, whether those are the project managers or the field operation managers. So it's very easy to relay the information to the rest of the organization in a way that's, one, efficient. It doesn't take a lot of time to pass that information along, but two, it's easily digestible so that they can take the information and say, okay, this links to a very clear set of actions that need to be taken to improve our performance.
Is there, kind of speak into a little bit how Dominate helped you standardize or clean up certain workflows within your specific scope?
Yeah, the biggest one by far were the approvals of our AP bills. And so obviously there are many different parties that are involved from the moment we receive a bill and it's entered in Acumatica to manager approvals, to my approval, and then our finance department led by Julietta. And so all these approvals, obviously the alternative would be over email, and it was very easy to make mistakes before this process. And even though there weren't any mistakes, I had found that it was taking substantial bandwidth that could be spent creatively growing the organization or improving the organization instead of really focusing on trying to catch issues and asking the question, is this truly approved? Is this the right?
What did Dominate specifically understand about your business that others might have missed?
I think the appreciation of the challenges that exist in a business like ours when it comes to communications between office staff and field staff. We always say the front side of our business is our field technicians. Those are the individuals that our customers interact with the most. Those are the folks that deliver the value, the direct value. And yet they're distributed, and so they have reporting obligations, communication obligations with the mothership, right? With headquarters, with our office team. And so how the ERP system facilitates that connection or hinders that connection is really important. So we saw that Rob and his team really understood that.
Is there a way that you feel that Dominate approached this implementation different than a typical ERP?
Yes, I think even though we structured and we started in a very structured way, they were very flexible and open to adjust, and that was really important. Before Dominate, we were spending a lot of time on back office number crunching that wasn't adding value to the business. In fact, it was taking energy that should and has since then been spent towards growing our business, improving the experience for our customers, and improving the experience for our employees.
And then the biggest thing that Dominate fixed for you?
It really introduced us to the foundation of our ERP. Before that, it wasn't a comprehensive ERP. And so the way the business, the finance side of the business lives and breathes, that was established through partnership with Dominate. I'd say if you're thinking about ERP, don't do it until you've spoken to a sufficient number of different options. Because I think a lot of times there are the big names, and depending on how businesses are structured from a capital perspective, there are boards and there are investors that are professionals in that. And what that means is that they manage sometimes hundreds of different businesses. And while brand names matter, right, the big ones that we all know about, the day-to-day experience is different. And so I wouldn't select an ERP until you get a broad spectrum of options. And I'd say Acumatica sits at the perfect intersection of something professional, robust, and scalable, but not as heavy. And it's as agile as we would have expected it to be.
And then obviously going through and implementing Acumatica and working with Dominate now, You've been through it. If you could you could say one thing to yourself then when you were starting to make that decision, right? If somebody's in your shoes back then, what would you say to them?
Look, as as important as Acumatica are your partners, right? Because I'm sure if you were to poll different Acumatica users, even though the software is the same, and even if, let's say, they have similar businesses from one another, their experiences are very significantly impacted by their partner. So you can pick a partner that is just a mouthpiece and can just transfer the information in a more sophisticated way, kind of translate what you could find on the website, or you can pick a partner that understands the challenges of running a business and the challenges of getting buy-in from people to use a tool, and the challenges of what it's like to hit road bumps and how do you overcome them. And so I think that's as important, and that's tougher to diligence, that's tougher to assess, but we've been very pleased with our partnership with Dominate. Really, I mean, they understand our needs and they're available, right? It's important. I mean, I can't count the number of times where we encountered issues. We had issues with customers, issues with vendors, issues with employees, and Rob and his team were available. And it starts there, right? I mean, if you lose time in just trying to reach someone, that hinders progress.
If somebody is questioning, what happens after go live, can you just talk a little bit into the support that Dominate really offers after go live?
Right. Look, we've had select projects that we've needed help with, and from my experience buying software, implementing software, there are folks that are great up front, and then because of the way the incentives are set up, are not present. That hasn't been the case. Obviously, we don't interact with them every day as much as we did during implementation, and that's a good thing because the software works. But as we expand our business and as we expand our expectations of the software, they've been there every step of the way. And I'll say many times the answer was, okay, maybe we keep doing what we're doing, but we at least explore different options. I've touched on a lot of different items, but being a service business ourselves, one of the things we pride ourselves in is just being fair and really delivering value to the client. And I'd say what I've really appreciated about Dominate, in addition to everything I've shared, is that they're not there to just squeeze the additional T&M dollar. They're there to help us, and sometimes that help is light, and sometimes that help is heavy. And it always seems very genuine, and I think that's important over time, right? You don't want to have a partner that you dread reaching out to, or that you always have to apply an additional filter of questioning of whether this is truly what you need or if there are other incentives that stand in the way.